What if I told you that the biggest climate intervention in human history wasn't done by scientists, activists, or governments? What if the most dramatic change to Earth's atmosphere happened completely by accident, through violence so brutal that it literally changed the planet's temperature? And what if that same story reveals the terrifying truth about what we're doing to our world today, except this time, we know exactly what we're doing? This is the story of how humanity accidentally saved the climate and then deliberately destroyed it. The accidental climate heroes. Let's go back to 1492. Columbus lands in the Americas, and what follows isn't just exploration. It's the single deadliest event in human history. But here's what they don't teach you in school. This genocide didn't just kill people. It accidentally became the largest climate intervention our planet had ever seen. Picture this. Before European contact, the Americas were home to somewhere between 50 to 100 million indigenous people. These weren't scattered tribes living in empty wilderness. These were sophisticated civilizations with vast agricultural systems, managed forests, and cities that rivaled anything in Europe. But then came the diseases. Smallpox, measles, typhus, illnesses that had never existed in the Americas. Combined with warfare, slavery, and systematic starvation, the indigenous population collapsed. We're talking about 55 million people, 90% of the pre-Columbian population dead within 150 years. Now here's where it gets eerily fascinating from a climate perspective. When 55 million people died, something unprecedented happened to the land they had carefully managed for millennia. Millions of acres of agricultural fields were abandoned. Irrigation systems collapsed. Villages were reclaimed by wilderness. And across two entire continents, forests began to grow back at a scale never before seen in human history. Alexander Koch and his team at University College London calculated that this regrowth absorbed approximately 17 billion tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. To put that in perspective, that's roughly half of what all of humanity emits today in an entire year. And here's the chilling part. We can actually measure this in the Earth's climate records. Ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica show a dramatic drop in atmospheric CO2 right after 1600. Global temperatures dropped by 0.1 to 0.2 degrees Celsius. This helped trigger what we call the Little Ice Age, a period of global cooling that lasted for centuries. The largest climate intervention in human history wasn't done by environmentalists or scientists. It was done by genocide. The uncomfortable truth. Now, I need to be crystal clear about something. This is not some twisted environmental success story. 55 million people died horrifically. Entire civilizations were wiped out. Languages, cultures, knowledge systems that had existed for thousands of years, gone forever. But what this reveals is absolutely terrifying. Humans had already become a geological force powerful enough to change the planet's climate by 1500. We just didn't know it yet. Think about that for a second. Using nothing but agriculture, fire, and basic tools, indigenous Americans had been managing the landscape so extensively that their sudden absence literally cooled the entire planet. This challenges everything we think we know about human environmental impact. We like to imagine that climate change started with smokestacks and coal plants, but the truth is, we've been accidentally manipulating Earth's systems for much longer than we realized. The genocide of indigenous Americans proves that humans don't need industrial technology to reshape the climate. We just need to exist at scale. We just need to manage land. We just need to disappear. From accident to purpose. But here's where the story takes its darkest turn, because what happened next wasn't accidental at all. European colonizers saw those regrown forests not as carbon sinks or climate regulators, but as resources waiting to be extracted. They saw empty land that needed to be developed. They had no concept of the ecological services these forests were providing to the entire planet, so they cut them down. Again. And this time, they didn't replant crops that would be managed sustainably by people who understood the land. They planted sugar, cotton, tobacco, monocultures designed for export to Europe. They built mines. They imported enslaved Africans to work plantations. They turned diverse ecosystems into extraction machines. The carbon that had been slowly absorbed by regrowing forests, it started going back into the atmosphere. But the real acceleration came with the Industrial Revolution. James Watt's steam engine in 1776, just 284 years after Columbus landed. Suddenly, we weren't just cutting down forests. We were digging up coal, oil, and gas that had been stored underground for millions of years and burning it as fast as possible. The accidental climate intervention of indigenous genocide had bought us maybe 200 years of slightly cooler temperatures, and we used those 200 years to build a civilization that could destroy the climate far more efficiently than 55 million deaths could save it. The terrifying acceleration. Here's what's different between then and now. Knowledge. Indigenous Americans didn't know their agriculture affected global climate. European colonizers didn't understand that genocide could cool the planet. Early industrialists had no concept of atmospheric chemistry.
But we know. We've known for decades. We know that we've already pumped over 2,500 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution. We know we're still adding 36 billion tons every year. We know the planet has warmed by 1.1 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. That's 5 times more warming than the cooling caused by 55 million deaths. We know that Arctic ice is melting twice as fast as anywhere else on Earth. We know that coral reefs are bleaching. We know that we're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction, with species dying at rates not seen since the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. We know all of this, and we're still doing it. The genocide that accidentally cooled the planet was done by people who had no idea what they were doing to the climate. The warming that's threatening civilization is being done by people who know exactly what they're doing to the climate. That's the difference between accidental and purposeful destruction. It's the difference between tragedy and choice. The deeper horror. But there's an even deeper layer to this story, and it might be the most disturbing part of all.
The regrowth of forests after indigenous genocide didn't just absorb carbon. It created what researchers call the Great Silence. Vast landscapes that had been shaped by human presence for millennia suddenly existed without humans. For maybe the first time in thousands of years, nature existed in the Americas without being part of a relationship with people who understood it as their home. And that silence, that's what Europeans called wilderness. That's what they thought nature was supposed to look like: empty, unused, available. The idea of pristine wilderness that shapes so much of our environmental thinking today is actually based on landscapes that had been emptied by genocide. This means our entire conception of what natural looks like might be based on the absence of the people who had been caring for those lands for thousands of years. So when we talk about saving the environment, are we trying to restore ecosystems to health, or are we trying to maintain the emptiness that genocide created? The philosophical abyss. This brings us to the most uncomfortable question of all. What does it mean to be human in the age of climate change? For most of human history, our impact on the planet was local and reversible. We could move, we could adapt. The Earth was bigger than us. But the genocide of indigenous Americans proves that by 1500, humans had already become a planetary force. We just didn't know it yet. The Industrial Revolution proves that by 1800, we could consciously reshape the atmosphere. We just didn't care about the consequences. And today? Today, we know we're changing the climate. We know it's dangerous, and we're doing it faster than ever before. We've evolved from a species that accidentally affected the climate to a species that purposefully controls it. But we haven't evolved the wisdom to use that power responsibly. Maybe that's what this story is really about. Not just climate change, but the terrible burden of power without wisdom, the tragedy of knowledge without transformation. We learned we could cool the planet through death. We learned we could warm it through industry. But we haven't learned how to live as a conscious part of Earth's systems rather than their accidental or purposeful destroyer. The choice before us. Some people look at this story and see hopelessness. If 55 million deaths could only buy us 200 years of slightly cooler temperatures, and if we've already undone that cooling 5 times over, what's the point? But I see something different. I see proof of just how powerful human beings are. If we could accidentally cool the planet through tragedy, and if we could purposefully warm it through industry, then we have the power to consciously heal it through wisdom. The same species that created this crisis is the same species that could solve it. The same capacity for transformation that allowed us to build industrial civilization could allow us to build something better. But only if we choose to. The story of accidental climate intervention followed by purposeful climate destruction is the story of humanity growing up. It's the story of a species learning it has godlike power over the Earth's systems. The question is, are we going to use that power like gods? Or are we going to keep using it like children playing with fire?
You know what haunts me most about this story? It's that the Earth tried to show us our power 500 years ago, through tragedy, through genocide, through the regrowth of entire continents worth of forest. The planet demonstrated that human presence or absence could literally change the chemistry of the atmosphere. It was a lesson written in ice cores and tree rings, a warning encoded in the very air we breathe. We had 200 years to learn from that demonstration, 200 years to understand that we were not separate from nature, but the most influential part of it. Instead, we spent those centuries building a machine designed to ignore the lesson entirely. The real apocalypse isn't that we're changing the climate. The real apocalypse is that we're changing it on purpose, with full knowledge of what we're doing, because we've chosen to see the Earth's warning as an invitation to do worse. So here's my question for you. If you had the power to change the climate, accidentally or on purpose, what would you choose to do with it? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if this story changed how you see our relationship with the planet, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the choice between accidental and purposeful destruction is still ours to make.